Well, this is an electrical edition of my 5 things, my 5 tips series. And in the first tip, we're going to cover copper clad aluminum, or CCA. And you'll find this stuff mostly online. It's basically aluminum wire with copper coating. And I've scraped some of this. Let me see if I can get this up closer to where you can see it. And there you can see where it's silver, where I've scraped it. And that's definitely copper coated aluminum. So what's the big deal about copper coated aluminum? Well, there is a couple of advantages actually. It's less expensive and it is lighter in weight, so you'd think maybe RVers would want to use it. However, there are several disadvantages that outweigh the advantage. First of all, it has a higher resistance, so it cannot carry as much current for the same wire gauge. It has a higher bend radius. It is a little more brittle, so it can break easily. In an outdoors environment like you have in an RV, the natural temperature variations, this is going to expand and contract more than what copper would. And over time, due to the constant expansion and contraction of the wire, the connectors at some point can become loose. And being that it's more brittle, vibrations are a concern as you're going down the road. You know, these connectors can break off the ends. And what I have here is the ANSI Riva LV low voltage standard for recreational vehicles. Even in here, they specify copper only. And the test that we can do is the proverbial smoke test. And I have a Dremel torch here. First, we'll try copper. Nothing really happens. If we put it on the aluminum, then it starts to fray. So that's one way we can tell that that's aluminum. As well, you can see where the copper is all burnt off. So how do you know you're getting copper clad aluminum when you order online? This is where I bought the stuff that I featured in the video, and it clearly says copper clad aluminum here. Sometimes it'll just say CCA, and also it tends to be a lot cheaper, so that's probably another giveaway. And tip number 2, we all use cable ties in our RV, and these are just standard cable ties. But did you know that there are UV rated cable ties and those that are not? And these particular ones are UV resistant, and you can see where it says UV black. I have not seen any of the natural or white cable ties that are UV rated. Even if you go with the black ones, they're not necessarily UV rated unless they say on the package. So do yourself a favor, they're not that much more expensive, if they're any more expensive at all, and get the UV rated cable ties. And also look for cable ties that have a good temperature range. These go from minus 40 degrees to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. They're not going to get brittle and break off in the middle of the winter. And electrical tip number 3, get yourself some good electrical tape. And again, as RVers, we use plenty of this around the rig. And what I prefer is Scotch Super 33 Plus. And the reason is that it has an extended temperature rating. And this particular tape is good from 0 degrees Fahrenheit to 220 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 18 degrees Celsius to 105 degrees Celsius. Some of the cheap tape that you get can be as high as 32 to even higher on the low end, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a little more expensive, but not too much. And maybe it's 20%, 30% more. Now 3M Scotch also makes a Super 88, which is considerably more expensive than this. And the only difference, as far as I know, is that it's a little bit thicker. For the RVer, you can stick with a 33. It's not necessarily go with a Super 88. And tip number 4, since we're on the topic of tape, I'll show you how I like to wrap the end of a wire with tape. So we want to start maybe an inch back and start a spiral. Now the spiral, you can see, is at the end of the wire. Well, we want to keep going until we have an entire width of the tape that goes beyond the wire. Then what we want to do is we want to crush the end. Then we flip the end over and then spiral backwards back onto itself. You know, this works best if you have to disconnect something and you have an exposed end, and this makes a relatively watertight seal. And we can go to my website and get a little bit better idea because it's hard to see with the black tape. But you see here, we start the spiral, and then we go beyond the end of the wire, pinch the tape, and then bend the tape over, and then spiral back on itself until we're done. And for this last tip, we're going to go back to the Riva LV standard. And here is an on-off switch that is common in RVs. And it just has, you know, the terminals on here. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this. And I have two examples here. And this actually I've seen in RVs where they've taken too large of a connector. The yellow is too big, but they're able to get it on. And the end is exposed, where this one is properly sized for the wire, and the end of the ungrounded connector should not be exposed. This is actually 2/50 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, and this is 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch. So this is narrower than this one. And in the RV world, a lot of these are the 1/8 size. And unfortunately, if you use the wrong size connector on the terminal, it's going to be sloppy and loose, and it could probably fall off. But what you want is match the 1/8 to the 1/8, and you can see that one doesn't budge. Use the right connectors, get yourself a nice selection of them. If you found this informative, this is just one part of a series of 5 things, and you can watch the other videos from the link I provide here that will take you to my website.